Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. It's time for another set of six. And tonight, it gives me great pleasure to have a chat with Mr. Mark Croston, the newly appointed chair of the FIT board, who joins us all the way from Wigan, England tonight. Mark, thanks for joining us and welcome aboard.
Thank you, Adam. Good to be on board. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's great, these chats, just to catch up. As I said, the recently elected FIT board, some new members coming on, and obviously you're one of them, and you've had the honour of being named the chair of the new board.
I have, yes. Thank you. And it is a significant honour, and it pays testament to the work that England Touch have done over the last 4 years when I was imposed as chair. So it shows an amount of respect for England Touch and the work they do and the sport in England. And I guess with my experience running and chairing World Dodgeball for the last 8 years and the 4 years I've had at England Touch, it was felt that I'd be a good person to manage the transition and move the sport forwards.
Yeah, certainly, as you mentioned there, England have been right at the forefront of the development of the sport of touch football in Europe especially, but also recognised around the world now by some of our members as a great model to progress the sport of touch football. And I know many of the smaller NTOs are trying to have a look at what England have done and use that as their role model. So, yeah, some kudos to England. Like you said, recognition in having you elected to the board. So the people that are watching it out there, don't forget you can ask questions in the comments. We'll pick a few to answer at the end of the stream, or we might even bring them up as we go through the conversation. So, Mark, you mentioned dodgeball there. There's a lot of history in sport with yourself participating in many different sports. But what's your first memory of touch, and how did you get first involved in touch football?
Well, Adam, I played touch firstly outside my front door in the street. I was brought up in a street full of rugby league players primarily, and touch was our go-to activity after school. It was on the tarmac there, and I hear you're a big fan of Neighbours in Australia, Adam, and it's pretty much like Ramsey Street where I was brought up. So there was no traffic there. We could have a game of touch footy after school or at the weekends anytime. And I was fortunate enough to live close by to some really good footy players.
Yeah, awesome. And as you said there, that part about just playing on the street with your mates, that's how the game developed. And I guess, continues to develop around the world. You don't need much to have a game of touch footy.
That's it. And I spent the next 20 years, I guess, from school trying to play rugby league. And then in the mid-1990s, I was lucky enough to go along to one of Steve Melling's tournaments in Wigan and started to get involved in playing touch on a competitive level, which I enjoyed greatly towards the end of my rugby league playing days. So that's when I first became aware of, I guess, touch as a real bona fide sport that's played really competitively and on an elite basis.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, it's from humble beginnings, the elite nature of the sport now, and we're an amateur sport, but the professionalism behind the way touch is promoted around the world. As you said, you must be excited to be involved with the FIT board.
Absolutely, and yeah, you're right in one way that it's an amateur sport, but I prefer to call it a professional sport played by people who aren't paid, because it's very professional in many ways, and in fact, more professional in some ways than other sports I've been involved in. That is a huge industry, and players get paid to play. So yeah, I think it's a professionally run sport by a lot of professional people in their roles. So that is exciting. And that's one of the things that I'd be keen on highlighting and harnessing during my time as chair and on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great experience around the world. So just give us a bit of a brief rundown on your history in sport. You mentioned a couple of the games there, but you also mentioned dodgeball. I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the development of dodgeball and any similarities you might see with touch football.
Yeah, sure. Well, I served the sport of rugby league for I played it and served it for well into 25 years. And in 2017, I just felt it was a really good time to look at something different. And then the opportunity to join the board of England Touch as chair came along, which I grabbed, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it ever since. And with dodgeball, it was a sport that, in a way, it was similar to touch, where it wasn't fully and widely recognised as a serious sport in some parts. And my role with dodgeball was to sort of change that attitude and turn it into a sport that is respected within the sports world, and respected amongst peers, and respected as a product and a sport, and that bring that to the masses and bring it to more people, televised, broadcast, and turn it into a little bit of an industry, which we did over the time that I was involved.
Yeah, awesome. So from there, what about a brief history of your experience in touch right up until your recent appointment?
Yeah, it's been brilliant. I think that in the 4 years I've been involved in England Touch, we've obviously gone through the pandemic situation. Nevertheless, we've been fortunate enough to evolve significantly in that time. We've grown how we engage with our community more significantly. We've grown as a business. We've grown in how we govern and manage the sport in England. I think we've grown in our reputation. And in a way, it was a really good time for me to move on from England Touch next year, which is when I come to the end of my second term of office, and focus my time on the role with FIT, because we're just about to publish our 2020s vision in the new year, which pushes us forward for the next 10 years up to 2030. And there's a significant emphasis on growing the sport, growing its reach, and growing its value in England and beyond.
And nice. So internationally, and I guess there you talk about the 2020 vision for England Touch, but what are the challenges you see for our sport, and how will they be addressed, or how can they be addressed?
Well, the sport is fantastic. The challenge, however, is making more people aware of it, growing that awareness, and then ensuring that we harness that awareness and do something with it. So a lot of people I talk to who I explain to them I'm involved in touch, they look at me quizzically and say, "Oh, is that a real sport? How do I find out about that?" And it's quite difficult for them in a way, the person on the street to understand and get the head around what touch is. So I think if we can explain it to more people and take it to more people, then harness that and get more people involved in it, I think that's going to be a great opportunity as opposed to a challenge ultimately. And then I guess one for me is it's working with the existing touch community and ensuring that we engage fully and properly with that community and reflect what that community would like us to do as an organization, and equally would like what they would like the sport to look like and be like, say, in 10 years' time. So I imagine that in 10 years' time, we should be looking at a sport that is far more widely known and respected by its peers in the sporting world. It is far more known and engaged with by its not just its members and our current playing base, but by people who play touch football outside of FIT or England Touch and other national governing bodies. It's widely known as a go-to body for content, for advice, and so on. And then a more significant challenge is, making sure that the sport becomes a little bit more easier to be involved in and play, and to volunteer and work in. So let's create an industry where we can get professional development more easily for people involved in the sport. We can create roles that ultimately are paid roles, so that we can enjoy that and work with that, and then use those paid roles in that industry to grow the sport even further and to bring it to the masses even more.
It's interesting there that you mentioned the volunteer base that has really been the backbone of our sport internationally and here domestically in Australia, where I'm involved. It's International Day of the Volunteer today. So, shout out to all of the volunteers that keep our sport running. And of course, you and I are one of those, one and the same. So, shout out to them. You touched a little bit on it, but what's your vision for the future of the sport of touch football?
Well, primarily, I want touch football to be recognised amongst other codes of rugby as pretty much an equal, and pushing forward to justify that recognition. So we talked about it being a professional sport, run by professionals and managed in a professional way. Well, I'd like to see that step up even further, and us to do more and be more visible about what we do. And I'd like to see more competition. And I think in Mike's set of six last week, he mentioned more competition internationally, more regional competitions, and more opportunities to get our sport out there, to highlight our sport, and to bring it to the attention of more people. And that will be obviously broadcasters or streaming partners. It will be commercial partners. It will be organisations that run major multi-sport tournaments. And it'll be government departments, school departments, and everyone you'd expect to be interested in a sport like touch, which I can't think of another one that's more accessible and easy to get along with and play and start. Requires very little infrastructure. So I think educating more people who provide sporting opportunities for people, particularly young people, is so important. So the vision would be that it is far more widely known and recognised and accepted, far more widely viewed in terms of content and news and about the sport, and far more widely played, for sure.
Yeah, and part of that recognition, as you said there, the sport on a wider scale and accepted by many of those other organisations you talk about. Part of that obviously is taking the game, live around the world. And how do you see the future of tournaments internationally for FIT, or that the NGOs can be involved with?
Well, I think it is a huge challenge, recognizing the different abilities of nations and to travel, and individuals to fund travel. So I think we somehow got to embrace that and work with that, and ensure that travel and the cost of travel and the cost of staging tournaments doesn't inhibit or prohibit the content that we want to produce and to share with the masses and a wider number of people. So I think we've got to embrace that and work our way through that, and work out if there are different commercial opportunities for broadcasting and streaming and producing content of the sport that don't necessarily involve countries traveling all across the world. So looking at where there may be hosting opportunities for certain tournaments alongside the World Cup, alongside the regional tournaments, alongside the youth World Cups and so on, that bring the sport to more people in innovative ways. Myself and my board will be, of course, looking at that in the new year to try to identify where the sport might be in terms of that in maybe 5 years, and then in maybe 10 years.
Yeah, the importance of content development there, as you said, the broadcasting or streaming partners. And I know England have been at the forefront there with a relationship with the BBC, and here in Australia, lots of programming content with the NRL touch football that happened for the previous couple of years before the COVID hit. It's interesting here. We've had a comment from one of our viewers, Simon Ince. The content would be great for development of players, coaches, and referees. Currently, I guess the other codes are seen as the technical go-to experts. So that builds into what you were talking about there, touch being recognised and being able to provide its own content for the development of our players, coaches, and referees.
Absolutely. What drove us in lockdown, England Touch, was our ability to engage with the touch community, referees, players, and coaches, and online development grew rapidly. And in fact, it was one of the things that helped us to emerge from lockdown in good financial and moral health, because we were able to engage digitally more. And I think that's obviously fundamental to where the future lies. Looking at your phone screen, it's obviously not going to go away, and in fact, it's probably going to be grow even further. So embracing that is crucial, and then using that platform of interaction on phone screens and so on to then attract partners and ultimately broadcast partners. And the partnership England Touch had with BBC was phenomenal. Live across the BBC throughout the Euros, for example, was unheard of for the sport. And the platform that the BBC provides is obviously second to none. And you're going from tens of thousands of people to potentially millions by taking up that option and working with such an internationally renowned broadcast partner. So it demonstrates it can be done. It's just a matter of providing those broadcasters with enough of a sell and enough of a package of what the sport presents and who it engages with to make that happen across the world.
Absolutely, and I guess part of that is we need to develop those tournaments or the content basically that drives the broadcast. If we can do that as a sport, I know here in Australia, I talk from experience. Some of our most recognised NRL players at the moment have come from touch football backgrounds, and they're now widely speaking about it and the background that they've obtained from their time in touch, and just how important it has been to their rugby league development. It's interesting because the commentators, they often, as a throwaway line, say, "Oh, this game's developed into a game of touch football," and then I sit there and recoil and say, "Well, what's absolutely wrong with that?" Touch football in itself is quite entertaining, and the skills, if they recognise it, can really contribute to their own sports development.
Sure, there's a significant overlap there with the skill set, isn't there? And I'm having been closely involved in the sport with England Touch for the last 4 years. I'm now surprised in a way that more professional rugby outfits don't use the skills that have used almost in every fixture in touch to develop their rugby skills. Particularly the passing and the approach work to the try line and how they engage defenders near the try line is particularly interesting to me, having played rugby league for so long. And it is a surprise that, and maybe it will happen where touch coaches will be engaged to provide insight into that for rugby league and rugby union.
No, it has absolutely happened. Tony Trad, the Australian Men's Opens coach, long-serving Australian Men's Opens coach, was involved with the South African Rugby Sevens team many years ago. One of the leading players here in Australia, Jason Stenton, back in the day also was taken by Rugby Union to be involved with the Sevens program. We saw the bronze medal, the gold medal winning women's rugby sevens team at the Rio Olympics. I think 11 of the 14 people in the squad came directly from touch football. So it is being recognised. 1995, I was involved as the coach of South Africa, and on my visit to South Africa, I met up with Ian McIntosh, who was a previous Springbok coach and was then coaching the Sharks in Durban. And he contacted me and wanted to know a little bit more about touch football. He'd seen it and just thought that the phase structures of touch football mirrored what he wanted to try and achieve with his rugby. So I had a couple of sessions back then in 1995. It was a long time ago now, but he recognised the complementary nature of our sport. Like, we don't compete against rugby or rugby league, and we're not saying, but we are complementary to the skill sets that are involved in those games.
I think you're right, and a particular area of intrigue for me is around the ruck and players remaining active around the ruck and creating an overlap around the ruck. I think the other rugby codes would or maybe should look more at that, because I think in many ways players become out of action once they release the ball in those codes, and I think with touch that the opposite is the case. Which is why I struggle playing it so much, because you don't get a chance to rest on.
There's no rest
on the blind side, which is probably what I did most of my rugby career. So it's a harsh sport, but there's lessons to be learned at how active people are throughout the game, and how you can switch off for one moment and you're gone, because everyone is active, particularly around the ruck.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had another question come in from Simon. I'm going to throw it up there now because I think it's a really important one and something you'd be able to speak to. How will FIT focus on inclusivity? We've got a unique format that enables the young, old, and all genders and different abilities to play. That last few words there, that different abilities to play, has been harnessed recently with, all abilities touch. How do you see the future of that for our game?
It's a really, really intriguing and good question. Thank you, Simon. In fact, we spent probably at England Touch maybe 12 to 18 months trying to understand equality, diversity, and inclusion and what it means to the sport of touch in England. So I appointed a board representative to look at that in the round to ensure that we were as far forward as we possibly could be with that particular issue. And we then produced policies, but more importantly, we produced working practices and learning and development for everyone involved in the sport to try to ensure that we are equal, diverse, and inclusive. Moving into my role with FIT, that will be high on my agenda. And again, we will look at having a board lead to address that situation and to challenge where we are now, which I think is broadly in a good place as a sport.
Absolutely.
But what you always find out is there's more to be done, and there's more challenge, and there's more opportunity there, because the more equal and diverse, inclusive you are, the more people you're likely to get to enjoy your sport and come along and participate. So it's an opportunity, but a huge challenge. So I think opening that conversation widely and across all levels in all directions is crucial here, and learning from that, and then setting out what that means for the sport internationally is important. But the most important thing is to continue that dialogue and continue that learning and evolving with whatever is going on around us to ensure that we remain equal, diverse, and inclusive as far as we possibly can.
Absolutely. And I guess, as a sport, we were talking off camera earlier, Mark, about, I'd still love to be playing, but for many various reasons, my playing days are a long way behind me. But it's always been a game. I've been involved in the sport as a player since I was 10 years old, playing with my father, and then my sister became an Australian representative, and we all played together. We were able to play. So the accessibility as far as being a game for all and young and old and both genders playing together has always been there. But I mean, more recently that all abilities game has developed, and here in Australia, the last two NTLs have had the all abilities final. And I know that the biggest crowds at the venue were for those finals, and the televised coverage of it just had such a great response to see the abilities of those players. We say, the players with a disability, they had more ability than I had in certain aspects of the game. It was amazing to see them and what they were able to contribute to the development of the sport.
So. Yes, and they are a category of the sport that should prosper and should grow, and there should be no reason, actually, Adam, why you should not be playing. There should be a way to create a category that fits around you and other people like you, because your knowledge and experience and enjoyment of the sport will not have diminished, but your glory days are probably behind you, like they are with me. But there's no reason why we shouldn't think more widely as a sport. Well, why is a player like Adam, who loves it, currently not playing, and then work around that, as we've done with the all abilities? And that should be the same with everyone. We should stress ourselves and work ourselves hard at thinking through, well, if there are people who like it, have played it, but no longer play it, why is that? And let's embrace that and go with that. And let's try to figure it out. We're never going to be able to please all the people all the time, but we should try.
Absolutely. So we move into a question we introduced last week to Mike. So as a leader who are you more inspired by? The former Everton gaffer, Big Joe Royle, Richmond FC's Ted Lasso, which I know is an interesting question based on our discussions earlier on, or England rugby coach Eddie Jones?
I would love to be inspired by, who is it, Richmond FC's Ted Lasso, but I frankly haven't got a clue who that is.
You're probably not alone on this broadcast either, Mark.
And I'm surprised Mike Abramovich has got time to watch TV broadcasts like that, being so busy as he is. You mentioned Big Joe Royle. Now I'm probably in soccer in England. Probably Everton's my favourite club, and you allude there to Big Joe Royle and the demise of Everton in the last 25 years, because they last won a trophy in 1995 when Big Joe led them to the FA Cup final and winning that trophy that day against Manchester United. A fond memory of mine, and I actually still play. I now play 7-8-side soccer each week, and one of the guys who I play with, Matt Jackson, he played in that final. So I've got a weekly reminder of Everton's glory, but more importantly, Everton's demise, because he's pretty much my age. So and that's the last time Everton won a trophy, sadly. But a grand old club. 1878 it was established, and that's great a name in soccer as you can imagine, but just sadly not as popular or as successful in recent years. So I'd have to say Big Joe Royle, but respect to Eddie Jones, who's done a great deal in rugby union and continues to do so with England. But and the other, Ted Lasso, as I say, haven't got a clue. So 100% Big Joe Royle.
Big Joe Royle. And as you said there, I guess in talking about Everton and the demise, inverted commas, of the once great club, I guess that can be inspiring as well. You don't want to see the sport or the club that you love in that spiral. So doing whatever you can to keep it at the top is the driver for you.
Well, yes, and in fact, these things go in cycles, don't they? And there's never a sport where a club has dominated continuously for decades. It almost seems to go in 5 to 10 year cycles where you have a period of domination, and then you got to figure things out. And a lot of things go into that. It's your players coming through, your board backing and supporting with a vision. It's the off-field team like coaches and technical staff that come in and out of clubs. And every now and again, there's an inspired genius comes along just to change things dramatically for a team or a club or a sport. So a lot of factors there that go into it. It's why we love it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's why we absolutely love it, because you can never figure it out. You can always get the bottom team beating the top team on any given day.
There you go. And we've got a comment coming in from Hannah Crisp, and g'day to you, Hannah. Everton could do with a Ted Lasso in charge. And then she says, if you haven't watched it on Apple TV, you should. So for those out there like Mark that don't know who Ted Lasso is, it is an American cable television show available on the Apple TV network. But it's about an American coach. I believe he was an American gridiron coach who was put in charge of a Premier League soccer club in England. That's the basis of the show, and it's very funny and very, very entertaining.
I have to say, Adam, please don't give Everton any ideas, because that might be the next trick up their sleeve. Seriously, I'm now worried.
Yeah, sometimes life imitates art, isn't it? Or art imitates life. So yeah, very good. And Hannah's also put another question in there, and I guess, or a comment as well. So congrats on the election. Part of the beauty of our sport is that we have these large festival-style tournaments where all age groups compete at the same time and in the same location. But this means that a country has to be able to host 100-plus teams in order to host The same with the issue with the European champs on a slightly lesser scale, which limits the pool of countries who are potential hosts. Do you envisage this changing to make tournament hosting more accessible, or do we need to preserve this unique part of our sport, I guess?
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, I think it links into the comments I made several minutes ago about working with our touch community and our nations and potential hosts for tournaments, and figuring out how we can take major tournaments to regions and to nations and to locations that, as you mentioned, at the present don't have the kind of infrastructure that is required. So there's two things that can happen there. We work with a host nation or body to develop that infrastructure, or we figure out how we can develop a major tournament that would fit with their existing infrastructure with some support. So I think one of the things that I'm keen, and I know my board are keen in this new era, is to engage more widely with everyone in the touch community. So in doing that, we will listen and learn and figure out where the gaps in our knowledge and understanding are, and equally where there may be some opportunities that we're missing. So that engagement process will help us to flush out, well, okay, we currently think a tournament should look like this, understandably so, because there are standards and ways of doing things that at the elite level are crucial. But we'll then learn about, well, if that's the case, how do we develop nations' capacity to and work with them to be hosts? Because otherwise it just isn't equal, diverse and inclusive, because the tournaments will go to the nations that usually host them. And that's an unfair advantage, I guess. So it's working with all those nations and bodies that are keen to see the sport played at the highest level in their country.
So just on that, we'll go back to Ted Lasso again. There was a great quote from one of the episodes where he says, and again, it's in the context of the humorous nature of the show, but he says, "I do love a locker room. It smells like potential." Where do you smell potential for our sport in that respect?
See, you're determined to get me to talk about Ted again, aren't you? Actually, for me, the potential is harnessing everyone who currently plays touch. Now, that isn't just the members or the players who are involved in each nation's tournament. Let's face it, every person who plays any code of rugby will play touch at some point. There will be touch played in schools and communities, and like I said at the beginning, in the street. So it's harnessing that potential with all the players who actually hold a touch ball in their hands or a rugby ball in their hands and play touch in whatever format that is, and bringing those together into our family and connect more with them, because we connect really, really well with our immediate touch community and family, but we don't have any real connection with people who just play touch outside of that. So I think that is a smell of that potential, Adam, that I think is crucial for us. And why wouldn't we? Because it would massively grow our audience and the value of that audience to us as a sport going forward, and to any partners or broadcasters that we would engage with. So it's harnessing everyone who ever holds a touch ball in their hands and plays it, or watches it, or is interested in it, and bringing them closer to us as an organisation.
We've got another comment that's come in there while we were talking about that question, and it's a great one. Given your background with dodgeball, and you talk about, being a recognised sport and what we need to do to achieve higher levels of the elite nature, what's the pathway for touch to becoming a Commonwealth or Olympic sport? Do you foresee this happening in the future? And, what sort of timeline should we be looking at?
That is a very timely and very topical question, actually. I'll deal with the boring side of this, really, the technical side of this. So, to become an Olympic sport, for example, a world governing body must become a member of GACE, which is the federation of sports that sit slightly outside of the IOC. Now, World Dodgeball became a member of GACE several years ago. Yet, recently there's been an announcement that that situation will change, where GACE and the recognition by the International Olympic Committee will be different, or maybe reduced or disbanded in some way. So there's some technical things going on there that make that process a little bit cloudy and a little bit uncertain. However, if I go back to the conversations with my partner with World Dodgeball, the president, Tom Hickson, this was 8 years ago, and we had different views on the Olympics. And his view was that, well, it's crucial and vital that we get there at some point in the future. I had a slightly different view, where I felt that by the time we got there, maybe in 2030 and so on, the value and the kudos that the Olympics has may be diminished, and the Olympics may look somewhat different. And equally, there may be other World Games type events or opportunities from nations or facility owners to host tournaments that would suit dodgeball better. And I think potentially it would be the same for touch, where touch could pursue, long-term vision of being at Commonwealth and Olympic level, which would be amazing. Yet my feeling is that it should do that, but not at the expense of pursuing other opportunities and losing focus on creating standalone events for touch that are both great for the sport and provide more elite competition, but are also good commercially and give us a great platform to reach more people.
Yeah, that's some great insight. And as we know, all sports, it's sometimes variations of sports that go into the Olympics. As we talk about rugby sevens, the product that they put forward is there. And now some of those other sports that they're not traditional sports by any means in the Olympic movement, but, they get a shot. But conversely, they're also very accessible outside of the Olympic movement and putting on some great product and content in their own rights.
Absolutely, and we know even when the games are hosted in Brisbane, for example, the host city has influence over what sports would get played in that Olympiad and Paralympics. So that may be the opportunity and the rationale to push hard to do that, and no doubt the other goals like rugby league will be doing the same. So. Yeah, it's a significant opportunity, and I think timing is everything. So if there's a games city host that has a particular connection to touch, as I've mentioned, I think it'd be crucial to push forward and see what that opportunity looks like.
Absolutely. Yeah, some great insight there, Mark. I really thank you for how you answered that. And I know, as you said, it is quite topical at the moment. And with the announcement of the Brisbane Olympics, it was very topical here in Australia. Lots of questions asked of what are we doing to get ourselves in the Olympics? But that insight you just offered there is outstanding. So I thank you very much for that contribution to the discussion. But I want to hit you with some rapid fire questions now. A little bit of fun. It's just one word answers, I guess, in response. Not too many, but just a little bit more for the people to get to know, what makes Mark Croston tick. So I'll shoot them at you and answer them at your will. Favorite season, summer or winter?
Summer.
Summer. Favorite food, surf or turf?
Turf.
Turf. Beer or wine?
Wine. 2018 Purple Angel Carmenere. If anyone wants to send me a bottle, thank you.
There you go. As a congratulations for being the newly elected chair of the board. That's what you're asking for. I do want to touch on the beer, the beer aspect of it. Are you a draft or a lager man?
Oh, in between.
In between.
Yeah, I'm one of those awkward characters who's looking for something that's just slightly different. Yeah.
And being from England, this is one that always interests us Aussies. Do you like it the England way, where it's slightly warm, or do you like it cold, like we drink it here in Australia?
I think in England now it's pretty cold, actually. Yeah, I mean, I did live in Australia, and I did get used to drinking the small glasses, that keep cool. So I think it's pretty cold in England, really, right now. We've gone to, like, the whole world's gone craft lager mad, hasn't it?
Craft,
Really? So,
yeah.
yeah, it's pretty much the same these days, I think.
It's also big here in the craft beer markets. Rugby league, forwards or backs?
Oh, forwards, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Does the game exist outside the the forward pack?
Well, I don't want to upset the forwards, you see. I can upset the backs, but just don't want to upset my fellow forwards. I played hooker and I played half in my league career, so bit of both really. But you got to love the forwards.
Absolutely. And back to touch football, summer or winter seasons?
Wow. Well, all year round, right? Why can't we do both? Yeah, let's do both. Let's create opportunities all year round.
And just on that, you told me earlier, and as we were talking off camera, you're about to play the later on today over there in Wigan in 0-degree temperatures. That's a bit of a commitment to the sport, Mark.
It is a little bit. When you say play, yes, I'll be there on the pitch. And rolling substitutes are crucial for me right now. But on a serious note, I play with guys who primarily are ex-league players and union players who are being brought back into the sport at a social level. Yeah. And I think that's happening in a small place in the north of England. And no doubt it can happen in any place across the world. So, and it's bringing those guys back into exercise and physical activity and camaraderie that they miss now. So I love that. I love just forgetting who I am for an hour and running around and trying to relive some of the glory days in some way.
Yeah. And that's one of the most important aspects of our game, and that's the reason that I love it. As I said, been involved with it for nearly 40 of my 50 odd years involved with the game, and it's just that the camaraderie and the fact that people that have left, I guess, elite level sport have somewhere to play and come back and experience that again, that feeling. And me being involved, I've coached internationally, I've been around the world, I've traveled to places with the sport of touch that I would never have visited without the game, and I still have contacts and friends, really tight friends, that we rekindle every World Cup or every international event, and it's like you've never been away. It's just an amazing aspect of our sport.
100%. And the festival nature that was raised by one of the questions earlier of when you attend a touch event is phenomenal. When I re-engaged with the sport 4 years ago, it surprised me how enjoyable and what a family and community feel there is at those events. And as you say, that camaraderie returns, and it's really special. And I'm sure that camaraderie helps a lot of people in terms of how they approach later life, and gives them a lot more fun and enjoyment than they otherwise would have had.
Absolutely. And we've had a couple of more questions come in. Really interesting one from Simon once again. He labels it a cheeky question. A cheeky one that we all want to know. Where's the next World Cup? So
wow.
it's I guess it's not one that can be answered here in this forum, but as you said, a lot of people want to know about it. And it's interestingly enough, another question came in from Cantab. How are World Cup hosts chosen? And I guess it goes back, Mark, to what we were talking about based on Hannah's question earlier. What's the process of World Cup selections?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognise that you alluded to earlier, Adam, where we're all volunteers. So the process is governed and created by volunteers and run by volunteers. So, of course, with that in mind, it's important to note that whatever process there is, it's done in the best interest of the sport by a group of volunteers who care passionately about the sport and give their time to it. Nevertheless, I can't talk about the current process, but what I can talk about is linking back to what we discussed, is that it's incumbent on us as a board and as an organisation to tease out the potential for host cities and organisations, and work with the one that gives most value back to the sport. And that can be value in many ways. So we will obviously be looking at that process as a board, and looking at the potential options for the next. I presume you mean the Senior World Cup there, for the next World Cup there. What I will say is that let's all just focus on making it the best World Cup ever, wherever it is.
Absolutely. And I guess broadly speaking, it is a tender process where nations are invited to apply. And then there's various things that go in it, as we talked about, and Hannah touched on the fact that it needs to be able to accommodate, certain number of teams. They have to be fields located and quality fields. And we look at also climate and everything else like that. So it is a very broad selection process, but we all look forward to seeing where the next Senior World Cup will be.
I think it's important to note. I mean, I can talk about this from an England Touch perspective, who regularly host major events. Youth Touch World Cup and Euros, and potentially in the future, the Senior World Cup. It requires a huge amount of resource up front to even consider hosting a World Cup, let alone put in a bid, and then actually to deliver it. So it requires a full-time paid resource to do that. It is difficult. And we know that, and we've experienced that and with England Touch, and the same with Australia, but we're fortunate to have that resource and that workforce in place to do that. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to recognise how difficult that is, and to work with those keen and those opportunities to simplify and make that process as fair and equitable as possible.
Absolutely. And once again, Mark, thanks for your insight in there. And it's, I really look forward to the announcement of the next World Cup, and just understanding exactly what goes into selecting the host. And I know I'm excited, and I know many of the members are excited about the new board and the direction that the sport is taking. So, it's been great to have this conversation with you tonight, and for people to be able to come back and view it, in its recorded nature, and just hear what you've got to say about our sport. And I'm excited, I've got to say, having listened to you and Michael last week as well. I think our sport is in great hands, Mark. So, on behalf of somebody that's been around the game, as I said, for 40 odd years, thank you for everything you've done to this point, and everything you're going to do in the future as the chair of the FIT board.
Yes, thank you, Adam. And I will finish on everyone who's made the effort to support me. That's right through the 4 years with England Touch. That has enabled me to step forward and take on a very serious and an important role for the sport. And all the good comments and kind comments that have come through, and a few jokey comments as well that have come through. And just to let people know that since we were proposed as board members, there's been a significant amount of work going on in getting us up to speed with the relevant issues and the background, and as a group of people, there's a lot of energy in the room, as it were, pushing forward our thinking and ideas. But we're not going to run before we can walk. There's a period of learning. So if the sport is expecting us to pronounce and announce, and things drastically change in this side of this year, that's unlikely. But in the new year, there'll be a lot more noise and news and updates coming out from us, because we'll have learned enough and grasped enough to be able to do that. And just thank everyone who watched today, and thank you for the questions, and thank you for being kind with the questions as well. They were really good to feel, actually.
Yeah, some great questions asked, and Simon's put a comment in there. Another very interesting set of 6, and I have to echo that comment as well. It's been great, Mark, to catch up with you, and like I said, learn a little bit about what you're going to bring to the sport, and as I said, I'm excited, and I'm also excited to talk to your board counterparts as well. We'll speak to Toppy G from China, who was also recently elected, and also Mr. Peter Top and Aaron Jones, your fellow board members from Australia, who we'll talk to in the next few weeks. So, Mark, to finish off, thank you very much once again for joining us, and for the way you've responded to the questions with some, I guess, some foresight and some real honesty in your answers. And so I look forward to working with you in whatever capacity I might have with the Federation in the future. And look forward to catching up.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adam. Take care.
Thank you very much. So thank you to our viewers for another very interesting set of six. And we look forward to bringing you another broadcast, hopefully within the next week or so, with another one of our newly elected board members. So until we meet again on a set of six, I wish you all the best, and bye for now.